Because what's the God going to do? Well, God could make up this big lie, and then he wouldn't be, worthy of the name God anymore, and say, okay, I'm going to pay myself for brain out sin by X. Okay, but X is in his hands, so to speak. He doesn't have hands, but, I have to use this analogy. So here's the payment for my sins. And this fake absolute God would say, well, I'm going to take what's in this hand and pay my other hand. Okay, if I have a quarter in this hand and I transfer it to the other hand, that's not a second quarter, so no payment was made. I still have the same money. Got it? So the paradox of a one absolute God is that he can never get paid for sin. So I'm just free to go on sinning all I want. And now you have what number 4 was about, a contradiction of two things at once. And then you have number 5, evidence present is contrary to absoluteness of God, because he's not getting paid. So then what? Is God really omnipotent because he's not able to get justice for himself? Okay, well, that contradicts the definition of God, and number 1 is absolute. Okay, well, is he really righteous then, if he can't ensure righteousness to himself? So, his omnipotence is called into question, his justice is called into question because he can't be just to himself, his righteousness is called into question, he can't be righteous to himself. And of course, that's not really love either, because love isn't being a doormat. Alright, well then if he can't be just to himself, righteous to himself, can't be omnipotent, he can't love himself, because here's this horrible brain out, sinning, and he can't do a thing about it, except kill me. That still doesn't pay him for the sins if he killed me. I'd just be dead. My sins would stop, but they wouldn't, the old sins that I'd sinned while alive wouldn't end. Okay, well then, how much God is he, and how much could he love me, and be righteous to me, and be just to me, and be omnipotent toward me, if he can't even be that way toward himself, you see? So the whole idea of one absolute God just falls down. Right there. So that brings up number 6. And this was something that Cimbolic and Veritas were, bantering back and forth. If the necessary foundation for the evidence is absent, and they were all worried, well, what would be the necessary foundation of evidence for God? That you can measure an absence or a presence. Well, the necessary foundation is justice. Because here I am, the evidence is contrary, that was number 5. Okay, and number 4, you can't have two antitheticals in one place. Well, here I am, just free as a bird to just, shoot, I can sin against God all I want. And if this God is just one absolute God, there isn't anything that can be done about it. Because he's got nobody paying him at his own level. There'd have to be a second absolute God. So right there you shoot down all monotheism. Bing! All the oneness Christians, they're completely gone. There's no such thing as salvation if God is only one person. What, does Jesus Christ hang on the cross, then go running up to heaven, judge himself with sins, and then run back down to the cross and go, oh, I'm suffering. Who's he paying? Then he'd be a masochist and kind of stupid, because there isn't anybody else to give it to. So the whole oneness crowd is gone. Judaism is gone, and Islam is gone. See how quick that was? Number 6, justice is the foundation for the evidence of absence. Okay? That's it. If God can't be just to himself, then there's no such thing as God. Or at least no absolute God. Or God has to be more than one who's absolute. Sorry, I hit the table. Okay? So now that brings us to 7 and 8, and we're back to 9 again after that. 7 in Symbolic thingy was breaking communication. Now, breaking communication means that there had been communication, or that there would be some definition of communication. Because you couldn't measure a break if you didn't have a definition of communication to start with, and you couldn't measure a break if there wasn't communication to start with. Okay, well, what's that? We'll go back to 1. We're positing an absolute God. Your definition of God in number 1 will determine what constitutes communication and what constitutes a break. Alright? Now, here we're talking absolute God. If we're talking absolute God, we're not talking relative God. If we're talking absolute God, then my puny brain, as a puny human being who's relative, There's no way I could detect or determine absolute God on my own. But if there is an absolute God, then this absolute God can nonetheless make himself known to me. Well, that requires communication. So what kind of communication is it going to be? Well, there are a lot of ideas out there about what that communication is, which leads us to number 8 on Symbolic's genius list. Previously assigned evidence of absence. And in his example, he was talking about a guy who sent a letter to his best friend. His best friend opens it up and says, if you get this letter, I am dead. Okay. That would be evidence of the guy being absent from this world, but being dead doesn't necessarily mean he's absent altogether. Got that? So what would be the God equivalent of that? If you get this holy book, that's evidence of me that you can't see, packaged in a formula you can see and study. Because see, I'm this absolute God, and if I just show up or show myself to you in a physical way, that's gonna overtax your brain and you just die. I don't want to do that to you if I'm a God of love. See the idea? Okay, well, there are 19,222 mothers from Nashville and Bible books, holy books. Okay? So, number 8, previously assigned evidence of absence. Well, evidence of physical absence, evidence of absolute God, how you can't see me. So here I'm giving you this book, because that you can see, that you can study, and since you can't see me and I have to enable you to know me, I'm going to use this book so I don't freak you out. I mean, if God is absolute and God is love, you're not going to want to freak me out. Right? So now it all boils down to number 8. Because the evidence of absence is paradoxically the evidence of presence somewhere else. So all I got to do is read the holy book. Whatever it is, the Bhagavad Gita, Quran, blah, blah, blah. There's 19 bazillion kinds of holy books out there. All I got to do is read them. And keep looking for the character of the person in it. Character, or historical accuracy. Does the story hang together? And above all, what kind of person is depicted in the holy book? Now that has 2 advantages. A, if the person depicted has a really horrible character, then the word God shouldn't apply. But number B, if you're trying to get a definition of God, you go back to the drawing board in number 1, and based on the holy book, you recraft the character, and then run it through the steps again. Because you're going to have to keep doing this over and over again, refining. Okay? So it all hangs on number 8. Which holy book? Alright. Answer is number 6. Number 6 was what? The foundation. The necessary foundation of the evidence of God's existence is absent. Okay, the foundation has to be justice. So this holy book, whatever holy book it is going to have to answer the question, how does God get paid for sin?